Hi, everyone. I can't get these girls to calm down. So, hi, everyone. It's Katie and Erin from Reconnect Health. We thought that in this new year, 2024, we are going to do some long-form video recording because we get to chatting with lovely professionals like Martine that we have here. And we always say, oh, we should have recorded this because we think people will be quite interested in it. And that's what we're actually going to do. So we have Martine from the Mama Movement joining us today. Martine is, how do you describe yourself to people?
I describe myself as a certified kinesiologist who specializes in pre- and postnatal fitness.
Excellent. So we've been working with Martine for a number of years now because we so value her expertise and her niche knowledge in fitness training and exercise in the postpartum period. And so we got to talking in a coffee shop a couple of weeks ago and thought that we should get together and actually film what we were talking about. So some of the topics that we wanted to tackle today are things like how do moms fit in exercise after having babies? Do we know what type of exercise we should be doing for our body? The external pressure that a lot of new moms, new parents have on like the bounce back culture. Mm-hmm. And so, go.
What do we want to talk about first?
I think one of the things that we had noticed was, and even personally for me, was how to fit in exercise. I came from an athletic background. I'm a exercise specialist. And even for me postpartum, I found I had a really hard time fitting in exercise. And so I had a very much like all or nothing approach in my head. If I couldn't get on a treadmill and run for 60 minutes, kind of like, what's the point? And like, I'm educated in this. I know that there is a benefit of doing 10 minutes of exercise, but even me mentally trying to overcome that, I found that challenging. And I think that we would all agree that we see some of that happening in our clients on a regular basis. And so is that your kind of experience, Martine?
100%, especially for folks who were exercising before.
Yeah.
Even like before pregnancy, and then postpartum, having to honor that whole rehabilitation and that healing process. Getting back into exercise is this all or nothing mindset. The in-between doesn't exist. And also we've been conditioned to not really understand what that in-between is.
100%.
So one thing I love to tell people is like, in this new chapter is like, how can you start redefining what exercise looks like? And that's really, really hard because our ego gets in the way for most of us.
Yeah.
It's like, but I was doing this and I want to get back to doing this and I want to do it now.
Right.
But there's that in between. There's that redefining what that can look like for every chapter of your life and also every chapter of being a parent or a mom and also rehabbing and healing in that postpartum process.
I heard, too, there's a really good exercise physiologist researcher in California. I don't know exactly what university is out of, maybe Stanford. It's in California, I think. Dr. Andy Galpin. And he was talking about, like, he focuses a lot on how do you get stronger, but also how do you grow your muscles? Because those are two different things, right? And so he said, and I loved this, because I find a lot of time their research is really geared to population that doesn't have a lot of demands on their time sometimes, right? And he said, your focus should be, when you're thinking about, like, I'm talking about resistance training right now, chaos management. And I was like, oh my gosh, that is so true. Because he said 90% of your workouts when you're a parent or when you've got like multiple people that you're taking care of is chaos management. So are you able to repetitively get in the work that you need to do, but still manage life around it? And his whole thing is like, how do you minimally do that so that you can make it work for health benefits, but also for like mental health benefits and things like that. And I was like, I love that. I'm going to approach all my workouts as just
chaos management.
100%. And I think it has to be realistic to this, like, I always say, like, realistic to now. I understand that we might all have different goals, and maybe you want to do 3-5 times per week. But if now doesn't allow for that, it doesn't mean you can't do nothing. Right? Like, we have to allow ourselves to be like, okay, well, this week it might look like one. And even for me with 3 kids who are a little bit older now, sometimes I want to aim for that 3 or 4, and then I did maybe 1 or twice, and I'm like, what happened this week? And I'm like, chaos management. Like there were times where it just did not line up, but that once or twice that I did end up doing it is still very beneficial. We're working towards something. We're building strength and strong bones, which is going to carry us for a long time into our older age.
And just like mental health benefits too, right? It's like maybe you only got it in once, but that's helpful to you not having maybe got it in 5 times because maybe you actually needed to sleep or maybe you actually needed to bring a sick child somewhere, right? I think that different seasons bring different needs and wants. And I think like maybe picking one or two that you want to focus on instead of trying to think back to like, what were my needs and wants like when I was pregnant or before I had kids. Sometimes that overshadows the now.
It's funny because I do think we see in the newer research being published the sleep and the mental health piece being tied into the like recognizing it as a valuable part of your postpartum recovery plan, as opposed to just, okay, well, make sure you get your 20-minute walk in, right? It's like, okay, well, only do that if you're eating sufficient calories and you've slept this many hours and your mental health is in a place where those things are all compatible. Where that wasn't maybe recognized before. There was such a push in the early 2000s of exercise, and to lose the baby weight.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I think you've done a remarkable job. For all of you who don't follow Martine on social media, you should. But Martine does a remarkable job of demonstrating how she fits exercise into a busy mom lifestyle. And she kind of, she talks the talk, but she walks the walk. And you'll see her doing these routines, and there's like toys on the ground, and there's children whizzing by in the videos. But I'm so grateful that you post that, because the counter to that is, usually a tall, thin, white woman in her early 20s running on a treadmill, right? Yeah. And that does not make up the vast majority of the postpartum population and women in general who are exercising.
I've been saying forever that I'm going to post sometime, like, whenever you read a lot of these, like, have a morning routine, have this routine, I'm going to literally post my morning sometime. Yeah. And then I'm going to, like, reach out to these people and say, how do I fit this in?
The 5 a.m. club, right?
Yeah, and it's also like there's a lot of privilege, but that's where I have a hard time when we're talking about like get all these routines set up. I'm like, there's a lot of privilege. Like we don't have 24 hours in a day like Beyonce does because she has like 72 hours compared to our 24.
Someone's cooking for her. Someone's doing her laundry.
Getting the kids ready, like all of these things. And I think expectations and also understanding that on social media, the fitness culture is not speaking to postpartum folks, moms and parents. That's not what those routines aren't often realistic for mothers.
That's what I was going to say. They often
like,
do speak to that population, but they're not attainable.
No, exactly.
Right?
They'll try to convince you that you should be able to do these things, and then you fall into that shame spiral.
And then you feel bad.
Yeah. Like everybody else seems to be getting up and having their ice bath at 5 a.m. and then journaling
100%.
and then...
Like, I have kids that have not been what people would consider good sleepers ever, and like my children are getting older now and they're still up at 5:30, and that's just like I think how they're built. But it's like, get up before your kids. Well, then I feel bad. Like if I got up at 5, they would get up at 5. If I got up at 4:30, they would get up at 4:30. Like that is just, and I always felt kind of guilty because they'd be like, well, just get up before your kids.
Yeah.
It's like, well, eventually that's midnight.
Well, if I get up before my kids, like I wouldn't actually sleep. And like I just think that sometimes the advice, like, take it with a grain of salt, because
100%.
it depends on you and your family and your like chaos management.
Yeah. Especially that we know that sleep is so important.
Yeah.
I think the worst advice would be telling a new mom or parent
to
get up before your child when they aren't sleeping through the night.
No. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it would be detrimental to their health.
Yeah, you're like stepping
mentally,
over...
physically, emotionally to be like, okay, you haven't slept through the night, but I'm going to need you to wake up an hour before your children.
Yeah.
Like...
Yeah, I've started to say you're stepping over $100 bills to like pick up pennies.
Yeah. That's a great way. Yeah.
Because like, if you're not sleeping, like we know that like you are not building muscle the same way. Like if that's your goal, right? Mm-hmm. But you're also not recovering well. You're at more risk for injury. Like, yeah, I think that I've had to change my thinking on that a lot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think it's hard. It's true. Like when you've lived the experience of being sleep deprived, it's like, I'm not going to exercise today. No. Right? I'm going to sit on the couch and just try to collect my thoughts.
And I think one of the hardest things in exercising as a parent and a mom, especially if you're one of the primary parents, is knowing how to listen to your body and knowing, are you not exercising because your body really needs the rest?
Right.
And the recovery? Yeah. Or are you so tired that being a little uncomfortable is just not an option right now? Right? Like, are you just so comfortable under a blanket in your sweatpants?
Yeah.
Like, oftentimes I am. Yeah. And then you can convince yourself, like, okay, well, a little bit of movement is going to be great. Or is your body really saying, like, I am so tired. Right. we need rest right now. And that's a hard thing as well when you're on social media and people are just saying like, there's
do it.
#no excuses. And you're like,
do it.
Is there an excuse? Can I find one?
Yeah. Maybe I could find one.
Yeah. So let's talk about that a little bit, because I do find some of my lifelong exercisers, when I meet them, if I have the opportunity to meet them while they are pregnant, then I'll say like, let's talk through that a bit, because sometimes I find they need like objective data, let's say, to tell them to actually rest. And so like I talk to them a lot about that. I'm like, have you had 4 consecutive hours of sleep? Which if you haven't, like, that we know physiologically, like, you should take a rest day.
Right. You need a chunk of 4 hours continuously before we feel comfortable with like regular
And honestly,
exercise.
like about 6 hours broken is what the research says. So like somewhere in there, a 4 hour stretch, but you should be getting another at least
a total of 6 hours at least, with 4 hours of it being unbroken. Yeah.
And then
that's the goal.
if you're not, the recommendation is that you take an early afternoon rest. So whether it's like non-sleep deep rest, so you're just like literally taking 10 to 15 minutes to just restore your nervous system, or you're actually trying to get in a little bit of sleep in the early afternoon. So we talk about that a lot. And then I don't know if you advise things too around sleep. I'm sure you do. The other thing I talk about with them is that like, if you woke up in the morning and you're like, okay, I had a really bad night last night, or like the baby is teething and like today is just not going the way I thought it would go, and they're not napping, and I plan to get a run in. I'm like, okay, but like exercise can be not just running. Exactly. And so we talk a lot about that. So like on the days when things aren't going well, but mentally you feel like you want to move, what are some strategies that you use? That's what I make it creepy.
For sure, flexibility is key.
Yeah.
Because that mindset of it has to be this one thing or else it doesn't count. Yeah, is really hard. So flexibility and that ebb and flow of, I don't think there's balance in anything. I think we're ebbing and flowing, and those dials are moving all the time. And so for me, one of the things I tell people, like, if you want to move but you haven't slept, you don't feel recovered, or you're like even a cold or something, but you're like, oh, I kind of want to be doing something, is dial back the intensity of whatever you're doing. So whether it's doing strength training, then you're going to decrease that load. So maybe you're not going to be overhead pressing at 30 pounds, but maybe you'll go to 15 and 20, or you'll increase the reps and really lower the load. But also like mobility flow is so helpful and feels so good. Like that blood is pumping through your body. You're getting some range of motion in all of the muscle groups, and it's really, really nice.
Yeah. Or like
and it doesn't
just go
take
for
time.
a walk. Yeah. Like just like you said, like go for
fresh
a stroll.
air.
Like get outside if you can. But just like I always say, like you have permission for exercise to look different on those days, but you don't need to be sedentary. I'm not saying do nothing. But I'm saying, can you find something a bit more restorative to your system? And they're doing it with the athletes a lot now too. We can talk about HRV a little bit, which I don't like. Sometimes people get too...
What's HRV, Erin?
So heart rate variability. Basically, it's a measurement overnight. If you sleep with a smart technology on, it's going to spit out a number you in the morning. The first thing I want to say is that I cannot compare my HRV to Martine. I cannot compare my HRV to Katie. It is individual, and they think it's probably genetically determined a bit. But I can look at it for clues that because my heart rate variability is very much controlled by my sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, that if my system is under stress, so whether that be too much exercise stress, too much life stress, lack of eating, like
lack of sleep,
stress, like I'm feeling cortisol, that can then start to see a decline in your HRV, which can give you clues that like, hey, maybe my system doesn't need an extra stress, so maybe I don't need a really hard workout today, or maybe I don't need to take that phone call that I really don't want to take. But you can look at it for clues that your system is not tolerating the things you're asking it to do very well, or that you could be like, you're going to get sick, or but you want to look at it over a long period of time. It's not something that like you can just start monitoring and take that number as a clue. But I do sometimes in my patients that like objective things to look at. I'm like, if you're normally a 36 HRV, and you can go look in your apps and find this, and then you're like a 17 one morning after really bad sleep, you were stressed about your maternity leave benefits, like something, right? And you're a 17, I say like pick something restorative that day. And that's what they're starting to do with professional athletes, is that they're tracking HRV, and if they're not recovering or they're not maintaining their HRV, they're going to change their training regime based on that data.
Sort of modify.
Yeah, that was a very simplistic
which is super important and fun that we're bringing that up more of a priority, right? That recovery. Because we now know that without the recovery, those gains of strength training or running or all of these things are not going to be as much as we declare it usually. And I think the best way to play around with it is to allow yourself to explore. So even if you have a lot of energy or whatever your energy levels are, try to challenge yourself to just go for a walk if you were thinking about running. And then the next day, do a strength training. Explore different movements so that your body gets your mind gets comfortable with being able to try different things, and then understanding that activity might be helpful on the days I have less energy.
Yes. That you can go to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you hear us talking about strength training a lot, because I think this is something to bring up. The number one thing that I see patients want to go back to is cardiovascular exercise, which is great. You need cardiovascular exercise. But I do think that sometimes the motivation to do the cardiovascular exercise is weight loss. And so that's not wrong or right. It's a discussion, I think, that's worthwhile having, because if your impression is that's the only way to maybe move your health status forward, then maybe we're missing out on some of these other benefits, like the restorative days that you're saying, but also the strength training, because we do see often a significant decrease in strength during pregnancy and in the postpartum period. And I think for injury prevention, and I think for just being able to support your activities, like the sport of mom is what I usually call it. Is that you really do want to see a return of strength again. And sometimes we miss the value in that because we don't want to look too bulky, or we just don't think that that's where our time should be spent. So do you guys encounter that same kind of resistance? I'm I need you to not sprain your ankle as a new mom, because recovering from a sprained ankle with an infant is very difficult. So we need to do calf raises. We need to strengthen your hip. We need to do you know what I mean? There's value in those other exercises.
There's lots of times too that I have so many thoughts that I'm my wheels are spinning right now. But there's so many times too I see people wanting to go back to a particular type of cardiovascular. So let's say running, right? But they're their strength and their muscular system and their joints and their MSK system is not ready to go back to running yet. And so then they get frustrated because they get an injury.
Right.
How often do we see that? They go back at 12 to 16 weeks.
Hamstrings.
SI joint pain, knee pain,
SI joint pain's killing them. But for whatever reason, they might have stopped running, because of choices or uncomfortableness or whatever. Maybe they're tired. That's what happened to me during pregnancy. And they didn't run, and then they expect to just be able to that their system is where they were when they were still running.
Did it.
The other thing, you guys, maybe let's talk about that first.
Yeah, so I agree. I think that a lot of people don't understand the loss of health gains, right? How much work it takes to gain and then how fast you can lose it.
Yeah.
And I think also it's because strength is not really trendy. You know what I mean? When we're talking about strength training, people are so afraid of getting bulky.
Yeah.
And I often get questions about how to just tone and not get bulky, and just the word toning isn't even a thing, but we've made it a thing, and it's not something you can actually achieve by doing certain exercises. That's not how the body works and the muscular system works or anything like that. And even metabolism of losing fat on a certain body part, we can't
spot
dictate. We can't spot treat. Yeah. But I think strength, we are trying to move the dial around strength being a fun, trendy thing so that we understand how much it's valuable for longevity.
Yes.
It's not something you're going to see the results right away. It is something you have to work at it, but also the benefits, longevity, short term in terms of being able to mom all day long, the hinging, the squatting that you're doing, the lifting of children.
Yeah.
A child that's wiggling in your arms while you're getting grocery bags in. These things are athletic movements.
Yeah.
And strength training will help you be able to do that without symptoms of pain or leaking or pressure coming down into your vagina. Those things are very important. It's just it's boring because it takes time to build.
Yeah. It's not instant.
No.
It's not instant. It's not that instant gratification culture that we're becoming more and more accustomed to. Right?
And it takes work, and it's on you. That's also the other thing. There's no magic pill that's going to get you stronger.
Right. And I think it's funny because we get sometimes a little bit of surprise from our clients because we're pelvic floor physios. Why are we talking about quads.
Lower body strength.
Lower body strength, right?
Yeah.
But the people forget that the legs act as shock absorption for the pelvis and the pelvic floor. And so one of the main treatment methods, if someone is peeing their pants when they're coughing and leaking, yes, we're going to train their pelvic floor. But if they, if they like jump and they leak, I need to make sure there's not a deficit in the legs that can take up that. And so the glutes and the quads, it's all very supportive to the pelvis. And so you don't try to just treat, physio in that one area. It's the same thing as the whole body. The whole body treatment is important, right?
The other thing that I find, and I'm in this stage of life right now, is that I was very athletic growing up, had my kids, honestly found it easier, this is me personally, when they were napping to fit exercise in pockets when they were napping, right? Now I'm at the point where my kids still aren't really independent. So I can't leave them alone at home for 30 minutes. We're not there yet.
And they aren't napping anymore.
And they're not napping anymore. And they have 10 kabillion activities. Yeah. So I actually find I have less time now. But I'm also at the point in my life where I know, as a healthcare provider, that strength training is vital to me it has been always, but I know that, I'm entering the phase of my life where I'm going to start to lose muscle really rapidly unless I'm very smart about keeping it. Yeah. And so I've been finding that challenging because I know in the back of my head, I need to be really focusing on maintaining my muscle mass or trying to build more. And I'm like...
Yeah, it's how do you reconcile that? I've been the same way in that I did a lot of contact naps. My kids were also not good sleepers, so I never got that nap break. I am getting a little bit more time now because they can go amuse themselves and I can do some exercise at home. But for me, for the longest time, and it continues to be so, is that I would do exercise snacks, which I hate the term of exercise snacks. Snacks should be delicious and not exercising. But it's where, hey, if I'm in the kitchen and I'm waiting for the kettle to boil,
really good
I'm going to do, Erin makes fun of me, I'm going to do, 3 sets of 10 calf raises. When I pump gas, if you guys ever see me pumping gas, I'll have my little Reconnect toque on and sunglasses so you don't know who I am, and I'm doing one-legged squats while pumping gas. Yeah. Because I'm just trying to fit in this one particular exercise at any time in my day that I can. And my rationale to myself when I had infants, when I had babies, was I'm never going to have 30 minutes to drive to the gym and then to work out and then to come back. So if I'm going to have to wait till they're 18, and I can't wait till they're 18 for me to continue strengthening. And so this was my resolution to myself, was that if I can't go to the gym and strengthen, then this is what it's going to look like to at least maintain for a while. And so that's what I've done. And that's, I'm lucky enough too that I teach exercise for a living. And so just in the run of my day, I'm demonstrating squats and whatnot. But for me, I'm now how do I've gotten in the habit of doing that. How do I shift back into exercising all at one time, right? Yeah. If I even need to. And that's something that I kind of run through my head a lot.
And I think that's really great. It's basically compounding. Yeah. Right? And again, it comes back to redefining what movement looks like. We've been fed this idea that a workout needs to be 45 minutes to 60 minutes. You need to be drenched in sweat.
Had to overcome that.
It has to be extremely hard for it to count. You need muscle soreness the next day. You can't be able to walk. That's what we define as really good exercise. And now we understand through research and all that, that's not the case. We don't want that muscle soreness to be that intense.
So sore that you can't exercise for another 14 days. No, that's not helpful.
Well, and that's it comes back to that chaos management again, right? Yeah. And to your point, we only, if strength is your goal, you only need 10 working sets. Yeah. A week, and that can look. You different. Just need the signal to the muscle has to be loud enough, but not so much that it's interfering with workouts, and frequent enough that we're coming back to it again. So I've started to more with my clients too, if chaos management is big in your life, then maybe you don't want to just train arms one day because what if you miss it the next week? And the next week, then you're not hitting arms again for 4 weeks, right? But I was the same, I very much struggled with getting out of my head that it had to be what I was brought up. It was a 30 to 60 minute drenched in sweat, so sore that I couldn't sit on the toilet the next day. But and the research has come a long way in the last 10 years too, I find. We know a lot more than we did even when I was in physio school. Yeah. In terms of muscle physiology and what we need to do to get, depending on our goals.
Yeah.
One of my tricks, because I am a mom of 3, and then we're in activities where all these sports on weekdays and even in weekends now, my trick is supersets. Like, my supersets are my go-to.
What's a superset?
So a superset is basically when you are doing, let's say, a strength exercise, and then you're getting 15, 20 seconds of rest, and then you're going to a second exercise. But those 2 exercises often are going to be opposite. So I'll do an upper body exercise for the first exercise, and then I'll do a lower body. So as I'm doing my upper body, my lower body's resting. And then as I'm doing my lower body, the upper body's resting. So I'm not waiting around for rest.
So and workouts aren't taking 60 minutes.
No. Now when you get used to the exercises, my work, like a good strength workout where I'm actually still lifting heavy can be 15, 20 minutes.
That's awesome. So you really made like effective use of your time.
Yeah. And I think for me in this season of life, that's the only way.
Yeah.
Even if I have, like we were talking about this before we recorded, even if I have an hour of time, I do not want that whole hour to be working out.
Yeah.
My past self was like, we're in the gym for 90 minutes to 2 hours, like waiting around for rest, like all of these like upper body. Now it's just I'm in a mindset where that's not effective for me. And it's also, I want to be doing other things. But I want to be exercising.
You need to be doing other things.
Yeah. And sometimes the other thing is not even being like super productive. The other thing is just like going in my room and just like looking at my clothes and like folding clothes and not having the kids. Like just a down.
Quiet time.
Down regulation of my nervous system for the rest of that hour.
And that's important too. That's important too, right? And that's what we sometimes don't recognize.
Yeah.
Because when it's put in front of us, we all think, well, no, the hour of exercise is better for us in the long term than doing a 20-minute exercise program and just zoning out for like another 40 or whatever it is, right? Doing your meal prep, doing some journaling, whatever it looks like to you, right?
I love too that you'd recommended the supersets, and it sounds like full body. So oftentimes I say, like, if you're worried about being able to, like, you know, if you're trying to actually build strength or hypertrophy, if you're trying to build muscle, which is 2 different things, and we can talk more about that. But I say, like, just do full body programming. So then at least you're hitting, like, your big
major muscles.
Big muscle groups multiple times a week. Even if you only got 2 or 3 workouts in, you're still getting enough signaling to that muscle that you're getting the goal that you want, if the goal is strength or hypertrophy, but they're a little bit different. But
for me, it's easier because then I can realistically do 3 workouts per week. Sometimes I can squeeze a 4th one, and I'd like to introduce more cardio now.
Yeah.
But if I were to do split days,
I know.
I'm never going to get to the...
I would be like 6 weeks. So oftentimes I've had people come in and they're like, okay, I want to start to like get in the gym again, or start to lift weights at home, or like add some resistance. I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about like, because again, I see a lot of people like, I have to do legs on Monday. Never miss a leg day on Monday. Tuesdays are like up like arms or whatever, right? And I'm just like, because then people are gonna feel bad when they miss a workout.
And it all depends on like what your season of life is.
Right.
I'm not in a place where I can and want to do that. Yeah. My goals just shift around what I'm able to do and what I want to be doing. Yeah, and what fits. Like if you have the window of 2 hours where you can go in and really focus on that, then cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
But don't get stressed out. I think this is where I love to talk about exercise as something that should be supportive.
Yeah.
It should not be adding something to your list at the end of the day and you're getting stressed out about it. You didn't get to it, and then there's no self-compassion. There's just guilt and shame. Then exercise is no longer beneficial, right? We're creating a negative.
Yeah.
We're going to have a negative relationship with exercise if it's this constant kind of, if you're always failing at your exercise goals.
Yeah.
And so I think goal setting is actually very appropriate with people before they start on an exercise journey, because so many people do rate themselves based on this success line that is, it's not even consciously developed. It's something that's been ingrained in them from,
as punishment a lot.
Yeah, and like a cultural awareness, right? And so really, it's hard to move the needle forward if you don't know what your original goals are to begin with. And you don't know when to celebrate.
Yeah.
Right? Like, doing 2 workouts a week of 15 minutes might be worthy of a celebration. And it probably is.
Yeah.
And so, you're right. It's like this negative spiral associated with healthy lifestyles in general, right?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. That brings us to 30 minutes. Does anyone have like any
30 minutes? 29.
Yeah. Does anyone have any other talking points that they think?
I feel like we're all over the place.
this is how our discussions actually go when we do get together and just chat about things. And so, Martine, do you want to tell people where they can find you?
Yes, you can find on Instagram. You can find me at The Mama Movement. On my website, themamamovement.ca. I'm also on Instagram. Facebook is themamamovement.ca. And yeah.
And you have in-person classes. You also have virtual programs that happen. Martine has done everything in her power to make her very accessible to people, especially if they do have a lot of time constraints and financial constraints. And so we strongly recommend that you look her up and you give her a follow. And hopefully we can do this again sometime in the future.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening or watching. Bye.
Bye.